Hello, and welcome back to this skills video. In this skills video, we're going to look through an exam question that the student completed a couple of years ago on a change continuity question. The question is focused on Germany, as you'll see, but of course the skills apply to any change continuity essay that you might take on. Just a quick reminder then that this is the mark scheme that's used for all essays, all A-level essays in history. And it has those four kind of areas that the exam board look for in the marking of any essay. These four areas are worth bearing in mind as we look at the essay, because they give us a guide as to A, what the exam board wants to see, and then B, what sort of quality of answer we are getting. So firstly, in the red column here, knowledge and understanding, and obviously the further down we go in the levels, the better knowledge there is. Down here, look, they've got sufficient knowledge to respond fully, that there's nothing that they don't know. Or, and we'll think about this as we look at the essay in question, have they got enough knowledge in order to answer the question properly? Is there anything that's kind of held them back in terms of their knowledge? Then down this end, normally do this one first because it's the most straightforward. This is about organisation. Is the answer well organised, generally organised, or is even better than that, that it's communicated with clarity and precision? So we're going to look at the organisation and the communication. This one column, the blue column, is about the judgment that's reached. Have they got a sensible reason for that? Have they not backed it up very well? And then in here, have they backed it up really well, that it's valid criteria, and they've, in fact, it says they're established and applied. And in a factor question, like a cause question or a consequence question, we'd expect to see this relative significance of the factors. We might see a bit of like the change continuity compared and contrasted a bit to each other, but really we're looking for developed reasoning here more than that sort of linking between them. And that also goes for this as well. Some analysis, sustained analysis in between, a good deal of analysis. And there is also the sense of analysis of relationship between key features. So just a sense of like, what is it that's changed here, and what is it that maybe hasn't changed so quickly? But again, likewise, because it's not a factor question, we're not going to see so much, well, we're not going to see a linking between factors. Good. So let's move on to having a look at the question. So this was the question that the student chose, 20 mark, obviously, essay question. How far do you agree that the Nuremberg laws marked a change in the policy of the Nazi regime towards the Jewish population in Germany in the years 1933 to 35? So topic 3 is about the establishment of Nazi Germany, and it just lasts 1933 to 35. If you bring in evidence from outside that can be applicable, but they're not expecting you to have that, and really you shouldn't fit your whole argument around it, because you're probably not going to be answering the questions. In this case, they're asking about the Nuremberg laws, which were passed in 1935, and they're saying, does this mark a change in how things have been going? So we're going to expect to see a section saying that the Nuremberg laws did really mark a change in the policy of the Nazi regime, that they made things much worse for the Jewish population. The Nuremberg laws in 1935 kind of defined who was going to be Jewish and who wasn't, and removed their citizenship and said they couldn't marry non-Jewish Germans, and really sort of started that policy of legal anti-Semitism in a real way. It was a step up in the seriousness of policy. In the second half of the essay, I'd expect to see some argument that actually the Nuremberg laws were just a kind of a continuation, although they were a step up, actually that they were a predictable step up, that there had been a sense of this coming all along. So we're going to have a look at what the student does. And I think what we'll do is have a look through, we'll read the introduction, then we'll look at the organisation of the essay, and then sort of come back and look at the evidence and the analysis. So here we go. Here's the introduction. The passing of the Nuremberg laws alongside the Reich citizenship laws in November 1935 for the first time illustrated in law the Nazi attitude toward the Jewish people. So that's the idea of change at the first time. straight away. Illustrated in law the Nazi attitude towards Jewish people. But that it was the first piece of legal material against the Jews shows a continuation, that's a slightly strange phrase, a continuation of over a decade of anti-Semitic policy from a party from the 1922 point program, from the 1922 point program, in fact, yeah, and continuing from 1933 with the boycott of Jewish businesses. As such, the Nuremberg laws did not mark a change, I think, in the fundamentals of the policy towards the Jews, but marked a change in its nature and severity. Now, straight away, this is introducing, exactly as it should do, this idea that there is both change, and the changes they're going to focus on is that change in kind of legal status of the Jewish population, but also that this was kind of a predictable step up because it didn't mark a change in the attitude of the Nazi Party and the Nazi Party members towards Jews. That they'd been anti-Semitic all along, and that they'd carried out persecutorial policies even before this. So that's really good that they're sort of showing both sides, and they've reached already. They're stating what their conclusion is going to be. That it didn't mark a change in the fundamentals, but it did mark a change in nature and severity. And what's really nice here, and why one of the reasons why this is an excellent answer, certainly in an exam, is that they've kind of split it down a little bit. They haven't just said yes, it's a change, or no, it's not a change. They've thought about it and thought actually it's a change in some ways, but not in others. And I like the use of this word fundamentals to kind of mean that the core stuff of it. It's not a change in the core of policy of what they believe, like the deep rooted stuff, but it is a change in kind of how that's expressed. So we're going to have a quick look then at the organisation, because that's nice and easy to see through it. Here they've introduced an answer, and then here in the first paragraph, major change. We'll highlight this in green so it fits the major change. And then this paragraph, we're going to expect to talk about change. Look, we can see the word change there at the bottom. Lovely. The next paragraph, the Nuremberg laws further show a change in the nature of policy. So it's good to focus on policy too. And we'd hope to see down here at the bottom, that's quite a long last sentence. As a result of change in the nature of policy, there they're concluding that bit. Nice. Then into the second half of the essay, despite changes, fundamental ideas behind them were only a continuation. And there at the bottom of this paragraph, again, you can see the word continuation behind the annoying watermark. Furthermore, Hitler's method of government, a Darwinian competition to legislate the first world, further fundamentals were a continuation. So this, again, so they've got quite big handwriting, but this is still in the first sentence. And then down here, hopefully, we're going to see the word continuation. Represented the continuation, if exaggeration, which they spelled slightly eccentrically. So then in fact, we'll come back to the conclusion later on, shall we? But what we've got there, you can see is 4 paragraphs, first 2 on change, the second 2 on continuation. And it's really clear at the start and end of those paragraphs what the focus of that will be. Now, the great thing about that is that, I mean, hopefully they're going to explain themselves well, and that will lend our ability to think of the precision and clarity of that answer. But we can certainly say at the start, even without reading the essay, that it's generally well organised and that they're communicating with clarity where their answer is going, because of the introduction and because of those opening lines of each paragraph. So let's have a look at what they argue then. So now we're kind of thinking about the analysis and the knowledge. And of course, we're going to get a better impression of their communication as we go to. The major change shown by the laws to the policy towards Jews is that the inferiority of the Jewish race to the Aryan Germans is enshrined in laws. So the inferiority is part of their knowledge. They know what the Nuremberg laws are about. The Reich marriage laws prevented marriage and sexual relations between Jews and non-Jews in law, and Reich citizenship law. So the Nuremberg laws are actually a collection of two laws, and they've picked out what they were, and they know the names for them and what they did. The Reich marriage law, and then secondly, the Reich citizenship law, issued under the umbrella of the Nuremberg laws, stripped Jews of their citizenship, labeling them subjects. So that's knowledge here. Very good. And then we're going to hope to see some analysis of that. These laws mark a major change because these ideas that Jews were alien parasites feeding from and destroying German society, of which they were not a part, had simply been social and party attitude. So now they're law, but they had been just kind of what people had felt before, some people had felt before. As legislation, though, the Jews were legally not part of the community, marking a change in the nature of policy towards Jews from 1933. So it's really clear there why they think this is a change. This is a change because it's putting in law, writing down what their status is, and that beforehand this hadn't been their status, and now it is. The Nuremberg laws further show a change in the nature of policy against Jews because it further enshrines eugenic theory of Jewish ethnicity in law. Such had previously been social attitude, so that's why it's a change. That a Jewish household, a Jewish heritage was undesirable and evil, but that the laws defined a Jew as someone now with 3 Jewish grandparents and is not practicing Jew, or 2 Jewish grandparents and practices their religion. So those were the 2 ways. In fact, the Reich citizenship law, this is just after the Nuremberg laws, really, but it clarified what had been a little bit vague in the Nuremberg laws themselves. And they pinned down exactly what it meant to be a Jew or not a Jew. And that's what they're talking about here. So that's their knowledge again shining through. As a result, a change in the nature of policy is shown because it provided a legal and unarguable definition of a Jew to provide a base from which to extend persecution on a genetic basis, as well as a cultural undescribability already existing in society. Undesirability, that makes more sense. So it's a legal basis now, an unarguable definition of a Jew, provided a base from which to extend persecution on a genetic basis. I would say a scientific basis, but anyway, pseudo-scientific basis, as well as one of cultural undesirability. So they're saying this marks a real change because it's moving from just I don't like Jews to I can prove you're a Jew and I'm going to persecute you because of it. Despite changes in the nature of policy towards Jews, the fundamental ideas behind it were only a continuation of ideas from 1933 and earlier Nazi Party and the earlier Nazi Party. Nazi ideology had been anti-Semitic as a basic principle from the 1920s. The 1921 22-point program, not quite sure about the date there, but anyway, denounced Jews as citizens, and such ideas would have driven the party through to the 1930s. So this is a little vague here, isn't it? So the Nuremberg laws can be seen as a continuation of Nazi policy towards Jews. In fact, in 1933, a statewide boycott was attempted on Jewish businesses, showing anti-Semitic policy and punishment as policies of the Nazi Party, despite at the time being unsupported by Jews, which the Nuremberg laws, which the Nuremberg laws provided. As a result, it can be argued that the Nuremberg laws were not a change of policy by the Nazis from 1933, but a continuation of anti-Semitic ideals. So this bit here is where they're really explaining this knowledge. So they've got some knowledge here. They know that the Nazis have always been anti-Semitic, and they've got two bits of evidence. The 22-point program, which is the original Nazi program from the early 1920s when Hitler was just getting into position of leadership in the Nazi Party, and this the statewide boycott in April 1933. Which only lasted a day and wasn't kind of taken up hugely by the German population, but was definitely a Nazi policy and illustrates their anti-Semitism from the start. And they're saying, look here, that therefore this isn't a massive change because they've always been anti-Semitic. So that's a point well proven. And then their second continuation point. Furthermore, that Hitler's method of government, a Darwinian competition to legislate to the Führer's will. So let me just explain this briefly, that Hitler's idea maybe of government is a bit controversial, but he seems to have at least suggested this was his idea, was that rather than him picking something and telling people what to do, that he would sort of suggest an area that he might want laws written in, and that he would wait to see who had the best ideas, that they had his ministers and his party and the state officials had to compete to win his approval for their ideas. And then, therefore, to legislate to the Führer as well, to pick the sort of most Hitler, most Nazi idea about this particular thing. So this idea shows further that the fundamentals of Nazi policy of the Nuremberg laws were a continuation from 1933, as they were a predictable escalation of Nazi ideology. Let's just, here we are, the Darwinian competition, the Führer's will. Hitler's ministers were encouraged to calculate his ideology by reading Mein Kampf. Yes, they were. Fact. And early Nazi work, and legislate accordingly to the Führer as well. So to decide what would Hitler do? Oh, this is what he'll do. I'll take this to him. He'll love that. That department's authority overlapped, created competition to create the purest representation of the Führer as well. So they're explaining that there. The Nuremberg laws illustrate the results of the competition being extreme and could be seen to represent a change due to such extremity, legalizing the inferiority of the community. But in reality, all ideas stemmed from the same anti-Semitic principle. Referring again to the rejection of Jewish citizenship in early Nazi literature. As a result, it is clear that the Nuremberg laws represented a continuation, if exaggeration, of Nazi policy towards Jews, because such was forced by Hitler's governing style, and all legislation stemmed from the same anti-Semitic ideals. So the first continuation point was saying it continues in terms of policy. Look what they'd said, look what they started to do. And then the second continuation policy is sort of slightly subtly different, isn't it? It's saying actually it's the way that the Nazis, well, anyway, Hitler ran the country, made it kind of inevitable that this sort of escalation, this growing radicalism would happen, because that's what he was, how he had set up his government to work. So let's have a look at the judgment then. Overall, while Nuremberg laws reflected a change in the nature of Nazi policy towards Jews, there's this idea of change again, it did not represent a change in the fundamentals of the policy. The continuation of anti-Semitic ideals can be evidenced from 1933, and such a continuation was forced by Hitler's authoritarian government style. The legislation of Jewish inferiority and stopping of citizenship was an unprecedented step in that continuation, but cannot be considered a dramatic or even surprising change. So this here is the core of what they've been arguing all along, that the policy is both a change and a continuation, that it's a change in the kind of legal position of Jews. It's a definite step forward in radicalism. It was unprecedented step, but also that it fitted in exactly with what they had said before. And it's not surprising. It's not even dramatic, because it was there to be read and heard in Nazi literature and speeches beforehand. So it seems like a fundamental change in policy, but actually it was a continuation of their ideals and their ideology. So let's have a quick look back at the mark scheme at the beginning, and we'll let's have a talk about what this means for the mark. So firstly, I would say definitely we're talking about an answer here that is really well communicated, that there's an argument flowing through from start to finish that's consistent. Each paragraph is organized. We know what it's talking about. Each paragraph had evidence which was then clearly explained, and a point. In fact, they didn't kind of over-egg the points, which was quite helpful. So it's definitely communicated with clarity and precision. In terms of the judgment is a good judgment, I would say, a really good judgment, in fact. There is valid criteria there. It's based on fact and sensible reasoning, and it's thought about very carefully. And they've really explained that idea and broken it down and said, look, it's a bit too simplistic to say that this is a change or a continuity. It's a change in this way, but in that way, it's not a surprising change. And in that sense, there's continuity there. The analysis of the key features. Well, actually, there's analysis in each bit, and it's very clear. It's not always. It doesn't always feel that extraordinary, the analysis, because it's quite a simple answer, isn't it? Change, continuity. There's a change in this way. See the change. This is what the change is. It's just explaining that, and then in the continuity bits, showing that continuity. By the time they get to the analysis, it feels sort of fairly obvious, but it's sustained. It definitely, in the sense that it's in every paragraph, and the argument flows through. That it's very clear when they're saying change and what they mean by that. It's very clear when they say continuity and what they mean by that. And there's not this sense of I don't know whether you're saying the change is more important or the continuity is more important, because they're actually done separately. The change is about the change is about like what it actually says, and the continuity is about what it actually meant. So in that sense, they have maintained their clarity of argument. And the one that I suppose you might think a little bit about is the knowledge, and it's, I would probably say it would go in here, that it doesn't really, there's good knowledge in there, there's sufficient knowledge in there, but it doesn't quite overwhelm you with knowledge. And in fact, it doesn't make mention of the early Nazi policies of there was a bunch of laws that were passed, starting with a law banning Jews from the civil service, and then banning them from teaching and the legal profession, and from being doctors, all of which in 1933. So they'd already started to legally persecute against Jews, and there's kind of the impression that this is sort of enshrining something in law. However, the point that they make, that this is a jump up because this is now setting Jews apart as people, is still holds true. So the fact they haven't mentioned those laws is an oversight, but it hasn't decreased the quality of their argument, and it hasn't it wouldn't have disproven their argument, I suppose is what I'm trying to say. So ideally, we'd expect that in there, and I think sometimes it's hard to think, oh, you couldn't have fitted that in. Well, in this case, I think they could have done. I think there was space for that because of the amount that they'd written. That said, everything that they'd written was good and knowledgeable, and the evidence they had really did prove their point. And that's why I'd say it's still sufficient, even though they've not quite mentioned everything that they could. they've got enough evidence there to present a convincing argument, because the logic of their point flows through. And the nature of these bits of evidence in this question, a question about the reason that I wouldn't have done this question to start with, is it's about quite a small, contained part of the course. And if you know it well, brilliant. But if you don't, well, you're going to really struggle. But there are really only sort of 3, 4, 5 things that happen, that the Nazis, to do with their anti-Semitic Jewish policy, and therefore there's not a lot that they could have talked about. So some answers you'll see in change continuity questions will be jam-packed with evidence because there's more evidence to play with. This one had good evidence and enough evidence, but maybe not quite comprehensive levels of evidence. And for that reason, I would expect, and in fact, I'm kind of working backwards really, because the exam board said that they would give this answer 17. And I can see that and I understand that, because I think they've said, look, it's level 5 in 3 of the 4 categories. It's not perhaps quite level 5 in the knowledge, and therefore overall it will fit in low level 5. In the time, under pressure, in an exam, this is a really excellent answer, and the clarity of thought is what's won it through there, and the sophistication of the analysis and the knowledge was good, but as I said, not quite comprehensive. So I hope that's encouraging, and I hope that's kind of clear. The principles there of the change continuity answer are true for all topics, unit 1, 2, and 3 on all the routes. Be clear about your structure. Try and think about the answer. Is it just change continuity, or is it a little bit more sophisticated than that? Always say why you're introducing evidence. Oh, this shows change because this shows continuity in that this hadn't changed. And of course, try and show as much knowledge as you can within the constraints of the question and the time. So as I said, I hope that's helpful. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on a different video. Cheerio.